Practice 1. Dream bridging. 1. Set up the intent to be lucid within your dream. That is, to realize that you are dreaming while in the midst of it. Say to yourself over and over as you fall asleep, I will realize that I am dreaming during my dreams. Select a cue, such as your hands or the sound of your own voice, to trigger the realization. Say to yourself, each time I hear my own voice or see my hands, I will realize that I am dreaming. 2. Set a gentle alarm to awaken you after 3 hours of sleep, and then every 2 hours following. Awakening several times during the night enables you to have more recent recall of all dreaming activity and to set yourself to the task again. 3. Once you have attained frequent lucidity, start looking for a pre-selected object not in your possession, such as a smooth stone. When you find that particular object in dreaming, begin the search for it in the waking world, knowing that you will succeed, even though it may take time. This object has been signaled by power as an aid to you. 4. Once you find your object of dreaming in the waking world, you have successfully bridged. Ask permission of the energy to take the object home with you, if this is possible. Set it in a prominent place so that you may see or feel it as you are falling asleep. If your object is a stone, it may be secured over your umbilical region by rolling it in a sash tied around your midriff. If it is not possible to physically take what you have dreamed, you may photograph it, touch it, or simply remember it. 5. Once you can bridge, you may attempt to bridge anything, a place, a person, an idea, a power, something for the betterment of the world, such as peace. The more you bridge, the more sure and sturdy the foundation becomes, until it is so strong that you may actually walk across it, into dreaming awake. Chapter 2. Making Peace with the Angry Mother-Father. We were ushered into the tiled entryway by a young Indian woman who spoke to us furtively in a hushed voice. I immediately gathered that she was one of the Dona girls, young, often destitute Indian women who come to the border towns from small villages deep within Mexico, hoping for work and opportunity. Dona Celestina had, in my knowing, rescued more than a few of these young girls, whom she often found begging on the streets. Once in her care, she provided them with room and board in the back area of her patio, and taught them household skills which they performed for her to earn their keep. Upon mastering a series of chores to perfection, they would move up to more skilled labor until they had mastered marketable skills and could work as seamstresses or in a domestic capacity. Often then they would leave her home, always with great respect. Not long after coming to live with Dona Celestina, the young women would invariably find out that she functioned in San Luis as a witch, a fact which, in addition to her awesome presence, often caused them to become terrified, as this young girl obviously was. And yet they always stayed, a testimony to the sheer strength and capacity of the Dona. It was more than a little evident that this girl was terrified of Don Juan as well. She seemed now doubly perplexed, almost ready to faint as she led us to chairs on the sunny patio and brought us glasses of water in silence. I must admit that neither am I immune to the terror inspired by Dona Celestina, although Don Juan had a fierce and awesome presence, which still, even after his death, demands respect. Dona Celestina's mere gaze can send a chill into the bones. You never get used to her. She looms shadow-like, and the women in her care whisper and keep to the corners and rafters, out of the line of direct fire, almost like bats. I began to perspire a bit as we waited and searched the patio for something to gaze upon that would stabilize me into a state of comfortability. My eyes lit on a small glass tabletop upon which was some exquisite rainbow-colored beadwork. The human speakers, especially the Mojave, the Yuma, or Quitsan as they call themselves, and the Cocopa are historically known for some of the world's finest beadwork, much of which is in museums. Dona Celestina is truly an artist of the finest traditional and visionary order when it comes to the delicate quality of her work. I admired the rattlesnake pattern of the beading. And then it dawned on me. This was the same piece I had seen in my dreaming. Don Juan smiled at me coyly over the top of his glass of water. The whole scene swam full tilt as if I were engaged in dreaming at that very moment. Don Juan interrupted my reverie by telling me that this is dreaming awake. He explained that when one bridges the dream and steps into it, one often begins dreaming again, as if the synchronicity pulls the physical and energy bodies together into lucidly co-creating the now. His explanation was halted by the unmistakable rustle of a skirt. I braced myself for Dona Celestina's impending presence. "Who's that chattering on my patio?" Good God! She was even more massive than the last time I had seen her. It is not her height, which is 5'7", but rather her shadow, which seems to follow her like an enslaved mountain. I cringed. "Well, Juan, what do we have here? How old are you now, 150? 100 this year," he said, standing and graciously bowing. "And you, my dear?" 79, I think, and going backwards. "And who is this?" she interrogated in a disarming way, gazing at me and pretending not to know me. "Oh, this is Marilyn." She stumbled over my name, which is difficult to say in Spanish, in a deliberate, sleepy voice, a voice that I had heard her use more than once to literally hypnotize her intended addressee. "I'm going to have to change your name, dear, to something that rolls more smoothly off the tongue. Merlina. That's a more slippery Spanish sound, don't you think?" She now looked at me squarely in the eyes. "It's nice. Yes, I rather like it." Dona Celestina laughed so hauntingly that a crow cawed from the nearby papaya tree. She stepped over to the table where the beadwork was displayed. "She has courage, there is no denying that, is there, Juan? Tell me, Merlina, why have you come to see me again?" I found it impossible to express the whole convoluted scheme. In fact, it was hard to find my tongue for any response whatsoever to that question. It was difficult to formulate a thought as Dona Celestina waited through the pregnant, empty silence, empowering the moment with each pause. She sat down in a bentwood rocker, crossing her legs underneath her long black skirt, as she began rocking and humming to herself a strange tune. One that sounded oddly like the one I had been humming to myself that morning. All I could think of was the punchline to a Mexican joke. The story is that a painter is commissioned to paint the Last Supper for a governmental affair. He gets drunk on the night before the painting is due and adds a 13th apostle. With sobriety, on the morning before the event, the only way he can think of to resolve his horrendous error in time for the banquet is to add a bubble coming out of the mouth of the 13th apostle. In the bubble are written the words, "No soy apostele, no soy nada. Nada más vengo a comer y después a la chingada," which rhymes in Spanish and means, "I'm not an apostle, I'm a nobody. I've just come to eat, and afterwards to hell I go." I said this in Spanish to Dona Celestina. She literally howled with laughter. For a moment, I thought both she and Don Juan would fall out of their chairs. With that, she got up and spoke quietly to one of her girls in another part of the house and shortly a delicious meal was being served to us on the patio. There was roasted goat meat, corn tamales, boiled squash, and fresh green jalapeno peppers. "Eat up," she invited. "A deal's a deal." And after finishing his meal, Don Juan rose from the table and left me with her. Fear did not seem to spoil my appetite. I continued eating slowly after Don Juan had left the table. I had never tasted roasted goat, so I proceeded cautiously, and I must admit it was superb. The aroma of the meat was somewhat metallic, blended with smoky overtones. The flavor was tangy with a marked roasted quality. The consistency was not unlike dark turkey meat. Dona Celestina remained at the table, also eating in silence. After she had finished, one of the girls who had been waiting imperceptibly in the wings throughout the entire meal brought us cups of coffee, with a shocked look of fear on her face. This was perhaps the first time she had seen the Dona dine socially with guests. Dona Celestina smiled at me and sipped her steaming coffee. I was still uncomfortable, so I examined the tatted Mexican lace tablecloth and the hand-painted folkloric china, both of which were beautifully festive and exotic, as the young woman cleared away our dirty dishes. I knew that I now had to muster some courage to break the silence, or else we would remain suspended in it until Don Juan returned, whenever that might be. "I couldn't help but notice your marvelous beadwork, Dona Celestina," I began hopefully. "Well, thank you, Merlina. That piece is the rainbow serpent. It is a yoke, which would traditionally be worn by a man. But I was beading that one for you." "For me?" I was truly astonished. Dona Celestina gave a sly smirk. She got up from the head of the long, heavy, wooden outdoor dining table and walked out from under the patio portico into the open garden area. Her dark skirt swished with each step. She stopped when she reached the small glass-topped table, where the piece of beadwork glistened in the sunlight, and motioned for me to follow her over there. I was overtaken by the brilliance of the midday sun reflected off the multicolored glass beads as I approached. Dona Celestina put the yoke around my neck and sang something in Cocopa to the tune I had heard in dreaming the night before. "Now," she said, "there is peace between us. You needn't fear me. You never crossed me. Didn't you know that among the Yuma and the Cocopa, women are outrageous dreamers? I followed your every move, Merlina, with great interest, I might add." I was speechless. For the first time, I could really see Dona Celestina. She is so very powerful that she seems dangerous, and yet like a rattlesnake. If you don't make a false move, she won't strike. It was as though the illusion of shadows had been lifted, as though an inner translucent lid, a veil, had been peeled away from my eyes. I felt that in that one poignant moment, I absorbed volumes about ancient feminine power. I suddenly realized that Don Juan could perceive her in this same way, and that it was for this reason that he had so much respect for her. I also saw that the young woman in her charge had not reached this revelation, and yet they respected her ferocity and power as someone who could teach them to defend themselves against the terrors of a harsh life. I resolved to ask her about these multiple perceptions. But first I thanked her profoundly for the marvelous gift and for the sumptuous feast. We took our coffee with us to the bent wood rockers and seated ourselves comfortably in the shade of the papaya tree. "Dona Celestina, if you will forgive me, I'll be direct. You scare the wits out of half of the people in this town, out of everyone who has ever had any dealings with you. You make your living as a witch, among other things. And yet now, somehow, I feel that you have been misunderstood. I'll be more direct, she replied. I haven't been misunderstood one bit. I am exactly what you perceived me to be, and more. Those people who fear me have good reason to do so. Do people who live near a live volcano not fear? What is your point? No, Doña Celestina. What is yours? Ah, I see what you mean. You want me to explain myself. Very well, Merlina. I will tell you what you want to know, but slowly. You will have to stay here with me for a while and learn the mysteries. What I have to share is for all women, for men, and of the earth. Do you agree? She weaves just like a spider, I thought to myself. And yet now I feel that I can trust her. Yes, Doña Celestina, I agree. Thank you for inviting me. She turned her rocker to face me more directly. I marveled at her long, bronzed native face, lined and yet somehow smooth, crowned by the black scarf she often wore as a turban to keep her lustrous, silvery hair in place. You feel that you have seen a different side of me now, is that it? Yes, it is. Think of what Earth was like before people started to misunderstand her power and treat her with disrespect. She was pure, powerful, sometimes volatile and harsh during times of change, but wise, life-giving, abundant. There was never any doubt who had the final say. The earth was in charge. She could be ferocious when needed, but she shared that ferocity with her chosen. The earth is a survivor. She will fight, but she also knows peace. She began to rock in the chair slowly. Now there is doubt about who has control. There is abuse of power, corruption, pollution. But I assure you the control is still in the same place, and the earth is growing fangs in case she needs to use them. What I do is merely a reflection of the powers I wield, female powers that come straight from the earth. Those who fear and dread me merely see a reflection of the repercussions of their unclean ways. Those who are at peace with me realize that a strong female is always responsible for the best males and females and for the best balance of life on earth. A strong female, if she is balanced by the virtue of her power, has strong love and loves strength. She creates strength in love, and there is balance and peace. If there is imbalance, there is anger and reason to fear. The difference between a witch and an ordinary powerful woman is that the witch knows the mysteries she wields and from whence they come. The ordinary woman is like a powerful car. Powerful because she has a dynamic engine, and yet she does not know how she works, and looks to the man to tinker on her, make her repairs, and know how to operate her controls. Can you imagine that the earth would ever forget how she works? Or could she forget that she is the one who gives life and teaches about its maintenance? Well, neither would the witch, but this is the plight of ordinary women. And this is why both ordinary men and ordinary women fear what they call witches, a name meant to evoke terror. Powerful men of knowledge do not fear, but rather respect powerful female wise women. Look at the way that Juan behaves. There is not an ounce of fear in him, and yet there is caution and respect, as well there should be. He is one of the best males I have ever seen. That is the way males can turn out when women are allowed to be what they should be. Hearing Doña Celestina speak, as an older Indian woman, about Don Juan, as a representative of the male species, was rather uncharted terrain for me. As a woman much younger than either of them, I know that he is lost, his mother, when he was 11 or 12, and also his father, and that when he was very young, he had one grandmother who lived a traditional life before the whites arrived in this area for the gold rush, I interjected. In those days, boys were men at 12. They had their initiation ceremonies into manhood and ran for 4 days and nights seeking vision. Life was more balanced, and the world of power was part of everyday life for all. We were at peace with this harsh desert and lived here comfortably. The men and women grew tall, the men often well over 6 feet. We all had straight bones, decay-free teeth, and long, healthy lives. There were many who lived to 110 or 115 years without suffering senility or weakness. There are still a few. All the men wore long, mud-rolled hair to honor the earth. We were a fierce people, and still are, and yet we can know peace. That is what we come from. I would say that if Juan's mother had to leave the earth while he was still young, she picked the right time to do it. The whites who first saw this desert were terrified of it, and rightly so. It can appear hostile, and if you do not live a clean and balanced life here, it will dry you up. And yet only in the solitude and open spaces of this beautiful, colorful desert can one truly expand and sense all that there is. The emptiness, the life, death, survival, wisdom, power. Your name, Soledad, solitude, suits you perfectly, I exclaimed, moved by the metaphors of the magnificent desert. I truly felt at peace with her. She was like the primordial female creator-destroyer, complete, mother-father, male and female in one, somehow dragon-like. It had grown to be late afternoon while we talked. Dona Celestina got up from her rocker and motioned for me to follow her down the long corridor on the right side of her patio. Stopping outside one of the doors, she showed me to a bedroom, which was to be my own during my stay with her. The cool shaded room seemed so enticing that I decided to take a siesta. Practice 2. Making peace with the angry mother-father. 1. Make an offering of apology to the female-male creative principle and to the earth. This offering may be in the form of a prayer bundle, a ceremony, or an especially written song. Select your offering by intending to dream it, and then by bridging what has been shown to you. If you receive a song, then sing it. If you find the items of your prayer bundle in dreaming, then look for them in the waking world in order to create it. Perhaps you will hear the prayer you are to offer, or will see the ceremony you are to perform. 2. Take your offering to a sacred place that speaks to you of creation and that you feel invites you to offer this energy. There you may leave your carefully crafted prayer bundle, which should contain small items that represent your covenant of peace and renewal. You may offer your prayer. Your ceremony may be conducted here, perhaps to include offerings to the elements and powers of nature. If your gift is a song, sing or play it with feeling while burning copal or sacred tobacco. 3. Finally, leave your intent in the place. Perhaps voice it out loud, and then voice your thanks. Walk away quietly with a silent mind full of gratitude. Chapter 3. Recapitulation. I awoke astonished that I had slept the entire evening and throughout the night without stirring even once. The sun was just beginning to come up rather than to go down. Morning birds were making tentative calls, seemingly asking if light was emerging. Stepping out into the passageway and crossing the patio into the kitchen, I softly told one of the young girls who was already up, dressed, and making tortillas by hand, that I was going out to my Jeep to get a few things. I quietly moved the Jeep off the street and in back of Doña Celestina's home. Bringing in some of my belongings, I tiptoed to the garden shower in the back area of the patio and had hot water for the first time in 48 hours. Showering outdoors among the desert flora, the birds, and the large tropical papaya, which had to be watered and steamed often, was close to paradise. When I was dressed, I went into the kitchen. The young woman was working silently and had probably been up since 4 a.m, judging by the amount of tortillas she had made and the pristine cleanliness of the kitchen. It was obvious that she was fearful of being caught talking without working and tried to answer me only briefly and in whispers while she worked, never looking me fully in the eye. I asked what I should call her. She told me that her name was Amalita and that she was Mixtec from Oaxaca, but that the Doña called her Mala, a funny nickname for Amalita, because it is a play on words that mean bad girl. She could not have been more than 15. With coaxing, she said that she had come to San Luis looking for work and that she had been selling chicle, chewing gum, on the street corner when Doña Celestina had passed by and asked her about herself. Mala described herself to me as an orphan who was uneducated, unmarried, and did not yet have any babies. But there was a man in her village who had been at her. She ran from the village to get away from him, only to find more hardship, as one can well imagine. Mala then told me that the señor, Don Juan, had returned the prior evening and that he was sleeping in the bedroom at the head of the passageway. She seemed reluctant to say anything else about any of us, especially Doña Celestina, and did not appear to want me to tell her anything about Don Juan or myself. I was informed that there were 3 other girls in the house besides herself, and that she had been in the Doña's home for 5 months. 2 of the girls had been there for several years, and the newest girl for just a month and a half. Chencha was her name, and she was already washing sheets at the scrub basin in the wash area behind the patio. The other girls were Neida and Pacha, and they were sweeping and mopping, but they were also learning to sew and often did the shopping. As if to change the subject, Mala politely informed me that the Doña had ordered Chinese black tea with ginseng root before breakfast and asked me if I cared for a cup. I accepted, although I was shocked that Doña Celestina had a taste or the purse for Chinese tea, especially when I saw that the ginseng was a fine quality, large, aged root. Mala quietly explained to me that there was a small Chinese community in San Luis who had excellent restaurants, of which I was already aware. The owner of the finest, she whispered, had come to Doña Celestina for a trabajito, literally a little job, in this case an act of witchcraft. She then showed me tins of first-quality gunpowder and Lapsang Souchang teas and 2 lucky cat statues, a black and a white. Doña Celestina had also received money and an intricately carved wooden staff. Mala recounted with sheer amazement. Mala's face then fell in horror as she realized that she had let the cat out of the bag and spoken too much, especially about something that was not permitted. I told her not to worry, that I knew that Doña Celestina's longevity and her talents had brought her a wide array of acquaintances and experiences. And I added with emphasis, the same was true for the señor. Mala's jaw dropped. She had suspected as much. She was in double trouble now. Hastily, as if to cover up, she told me that the normal morning's beverage was a tea made of ephedra, which grows wild in the dry water canyons of the area. I went back to my room with my teacup, snickering softly to myself. After breakfasting alone, some time later, I was in my bedroom writing in my journal. I thought that I had heard Don Juan moving things around in the patio area, so I quickly put the notebook into a drawer of the old medical desk in my room and went out to see what was going on. I was filled with questions about dreaming male and female energy, overflowing after the past 2 days' experiences. On the way, I picked up from the nightstand the beaded yoke that Doña Celestina had given me, for Don Juan to examine more closely. "Don Juan, did you see this?" I blurted in amazement as he stooped to move the glass-top table and rockers to a shady place under the portico and cleared a large area under the papaya tree. I handed him the beadwork, and he nodded with admiration, handling the delicate piece gently and turning it to and fro in the morning sunlight. "Do you know the significance of the design?" he asked me in return. "All Doña Celestina has told me so far is that the pattern is that of the rainbow serpent," I replied, curious for more detail. "A long time ago," Don Juan responded, "seers perceived that the serpent is the guardian of the realms of evolution. For female shamans, to have the serpent as their spirit helper is a most desirable thing. Among the Yuma, girls sought the serpent in their puberty initiations. A marked contrast to Adam and Eve," I joked. Don Juan laughed. "Fear of our own nature can be our worst enemy." The snake was so often linked to wisdom, sexual energy, longevity, and transformation in shamanic and esoteric traditions. Why was the early Judeo-Christian story of creation so twisted? I couldn't account for the discrepancy and voiced my thoughts aloud. "Perhaps it has something to do with the serpent itself," Don Juan proposed. "In our tradition, the snake is the guardian of the feminine, the guardian of caves, rock crevices, and of the womb. Snake power is female." "Aha, I see. They were dumping the goddess," I shouted. Doña Celestina walked through the patio at that precise moment. She smiled broadly at me, almost leering as she passed. Skirt swishing, she made her way to the sewing room where Naida and Pacha awaited her. I was awestruck. "What do you think the rainbow represents?" Don Juan asked me, twirling the shimmering multicolored necklace before my eyes like a hypnotist. In my mind's eye, I saw the spiraling double helix. I gasped. Ancient shamans saw DNA. I cried out. Dreaming is the world's most powerful microscope, or telescope, or screen. A trained seer can witness anything, but only with sobriety and discernment can one extract wisdom from the view. Otherwise, it's all smoking mirrors. The first act of seeing clearly with discernment is to clean the windows, if you will, of all preconceptions. That is the magical act we will perform today, right here in this open space. We are going to have a kuruk, a ceremony of recapitulation, in which we recall all of the ways that the feminine has been burdened and dethroned. We will place our acts of recapitulation that recount all of these trials on a pyre that I will build here, and we will watch them burn while we sing of her glories and her triumphs. There was a sound of power in his voice that gave me chills, as though he were invoking the primordial sexuality that existed before the very first spark. You like to write, so that is how you will do your recapitulation. Today you will see and write the creation, the story of how this whole thing began and how it changed. You will write the story to be burned, and in so doing the powers will return to their proper places. Dona Celestina and I will do the same task according to our tradition, and at twilight we will meet here again to recount and to burn it all. A sudden wind kicked up, signaling that it would be a dusty day. I retreated to my bedroom to write, so that I would not be disturbed by the wind or dust. The task was a daunting one, which I took seriously. Rather than a list that I myself was creating, the assignment seemed to choose its own course. It was rather as though the long silent feminine power within myself had finally agreed to speak. What I had thought would be a harangue came out rather like a first-hand narrative account of creation, stating plainly each place where the sacred feminine had been disposed and, as a result, had left us. I was in tears in places and felt that I might not be able to go on with it. But the cleansing, clearing intent of the task always reasserted its imperative and lent me sobriety. I spent the entire day working, and when twilight was imminent, I had filled an entire notebook, with the exception of the last few pages. At twilight, the words, feelings, and images simply stopped, as though the appointed hour was recognized by the energy itself. I walked over to the old washstand, placed against one wall of my room, and filled the ceramic bowl with cool water from the pitcher on its marble top. Splashing my face prepared and revived me. I gathered my notebook and walked out into the evening. Under the papaya tree, a large pile of sand had been placed, and on top of that, a small pyre had been built. Don Juan and Dona Celestina were already standing nearby, for they had, in fact, just ignited the kindling. Each of them held in their hands a small figure that they had made. Don Juan allowed me to hold this. It was appalling to the touch. A carved wooden figure of about 3 inches in height, shriveled, deformed, bent over, and wrinkled. He called it Qatar, blind old man. Dona Celestina then handed me her figurine, which was a clay doll, a female covered with red paint, naked with a snake emerging from her abdomen. I handed them my notebook in turn. They each felt the weight of it and flipped through the pages to see the rippling cursive flow front and back. Nodding in approval, it seemed that both were aware of the contents without having asked me to read from it aloud. Don Juan then began to sing a series of mythic song cycles in native tongues. Dona Celestina followed him, tapping her feet. The fire began to blaze, and a moment came for her to place the female figurine into the fire in a standing position. Don Juan's songs then seemed to change into a lament, and he placed the wooden carving to face the clay doll. Now they sang back and forth, as though there were a battle between the two figurines that were outlined in fire as the tempo and the tension rose. First the snake broke off the belly of the female doll. Then the male burned. Finally the female exploded in a loud shattering pop. The song that Don Juan and Doña Celestina sang was then truly sad, and tears were in their eyes. After that cycle, they asked me to put my notebook into the fire unread. It made perfect sense to me, and I did so willingly and with reverence. The tone of the songs again changed, this time to one of hope and release. There was singing until the last smoldering cinder had given up the ghost, when we heard the call of an owl and the breeze turned cold. Doña Celestina signaled that we should leave the patio and go to our rooms for a while. Then she hurriedly motioned for two of her girls to come and clean up the ashes. Several hours later, there was a knock at my door. I came out to find that all of the furniture had been replaced on the patio. Another fire had been built under the papaya tree, and this time a cauldron was steaming, just as I had seen in my dream. Only this scene was at night, and all was dark. I walked over to the cauldron to peek at what was inside. Fresh corn kernels and rice were gently simmering in water laced with night-blooming jasmine blossoms. We were served, and we all sat in rockers, eating the creamy, flavorful porridge under the stars. The temperature had mysteriously become less chilly. Night birds were singing with abandon, and a waxing moon was up. "We won't speak of this again," Doña Celestina began from her seat. "So if you have any questions, you had better ask them." I looked over at her in the moonlight. She was rocking as peacefully as a soft breeze. I thought of the relationship between women and the wind. Knowing that Doña Celestina normally blows northerly, I felt the change of her direction. "Have we appeased some force by our ceremony tonight?" I asked. "How else can I account for the changes in the mood that we experienced? It was as if we had ingested sacred plants in a mitote, an all-night ceremony, a vision quest in which ritual participants ingest the peyote cactus, a powerful hallucinogen, and seek dreaming, visions, and guidance, accompanied by ritual purification, songs, and fire ceremony. All of us were affected by waves of energy in the same way at certain moments. Dreaming together can be very like a mitote. Individual awareness merges with a heightened awareness that is shared. What we shared is real, Don Juan replied. The cleansing, however, was the most important part for you, Doña Celestina added. Now we can approach everything afresh. As Juan has been telling you, our sexual energies are very important to the magical world. A thorough recapitulation is necessary, and more than that, a purification. We had to burn away the dead illusion and prepare you. Prepare me for what? Well, for one thing, Chan will be here tomorrow. Doña Celestina smiled. Chan here? I reeled. Yes, and you know how the Maya expect one to be clean before they begin anything serious. She laughed out loud. What? Why? How is it possible that Chan is coming to San Luis? He comes about once every 3 years to trade medicinal plants and recipes with the hierbero, herbalist, of El Tecolote. That shop is known by healers, herbalists, and witches throughout Mexico. Didn't you know that's how we met? Don Juan answered casually. Once, a long time ago, when we were both young, I had brought in some datura, and Chan arrived while I was there, looking for some to use in a ceremony. We struck up a conversation, and a long acquaintance, as you know. We've been friends ever since. But Chan knows Doña Celestina. I tried to ask respectfully. Of course, she said. Curanderos, healers, and brujas witches, sorceresses, often have dealings with one another. He's going to stay in the house while he conducts his business at El Tecolote. This is incredible. All four of us are going to be under one roof? Up until that moment, there had never been an instance when all of us were able to be together at one time and place. I was elated and extremely excited by the possibilities. Chan was coming from the jungle highlands of Chiapas to the desert of Sonora. It was more than I could have hoped, and he was going to be here tomorrow.